I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedule and sharing a lunch with us as we launch our first Lunch and Learn program for 2021. My name is Joseph Tung. I'm honored to serve as the chair of the Education Committee with my two vice chairs, Henry Florsheim and George Connolly. I'm also very grateful for the leadership of the Silver Foxes and the 22 members that serve on our committee. I'm a proud member of the Silver Fox Advisors, which is a group of experienced business leaders that advises, consults, and mentors the Houston business community since 1986. Our goal is to empower business owners to become successful, and we're excited to celebrate our 35th anniversary in 2021. As indicated in the video, we support 20 CEO roundtables with nearly 200 CEOs across the greater Houston area that typically meet once a month physically, but with COVID-19, many of our roundtables have pivoted into meeting virtually more frequently or as needed. These roundtables are complimentary to join and provide valuable peer support during this critical time. If you're interested in joining, you can find more information on our website. We also provide complimentary virtual lunch and learn programs in our education series webinars. Of course, we also provide individual advisory board and professional services. You can find this and more at our website, www.silverfox.org. I'd be remiss if we didn't thank our in-kind sponsors of Griffin and Company, as well as Pierpont. These great companies are headed by longtime Silver Foxes, and we are proud to support them. Before we begin, we're going to do, first, there's a Q&A session. You can use the chat button to let us know if you have any questions. And also we have a quick poll. If I could get some help to put up the poll, there's 3 quick polling questions. You can take just a moment to answer those 3 polling questions. Okay, I'm going to turn the presentation over now to Gerald Murfish, who's going to be introducing our speaker.
Good day, everyone. Our speaker today is Mayor, Senator, and now founding Dean, Kirk Watson. At this time, Kirk is probably only the second most important person in Houston with the last name of Watson. He cannot run like a deer, nor throw a football 60 yards, or definitely escape from extremely large men fiercely chasing him in front of 80,000 fans like the other Watson we all know. But make no mistake about this Watson. He has already positively impacted many, many lives during his career, has had a very successful career, and in his new undertaking as the founding dean of the Hobby School of Public Affairs at the University of Houston, he will continue to positively impact the careers and lives of many University of Houston students who in turn will positively impact our lives in Houston. For over 30 years, Kirk has been immersed in public policy, spanning local and state government in Texas. Kirk Watson was first appointed in 1991 by Governor Ann Richards as chair of the Texas Air Quality Board, the agency charged with addressing air quality issues in Texas. He was vice chair of the committee that oversaw the creation of the Texas Natural Resources Conservation Commission, now known as the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. In 1997, Kirk was elected mayor of Austin, where he won praise for bringing different political sides together around transformative environmental and economic development initiatives. He then served in the Texas Senate for over 13 years. And in 2012, Kirk led the effort to build a new medical school at the University of Houston at Austin. After an unprecedented show of support by local voters, the Dell Medical School became the first medical school in nearly 50 years to be built from the ground up at a top-tier research university. In his book, Austin Unlimited, The People, Place, Passion, and Prospects, Watson chronicles the economic evolution of Austin through the lens of his time in public office. Among many other recognitions, Kirk Watson has been honored multiple times in Texas Monthly's magazine's analysis of the state's best legislators. In 1998, the magazine described him as, quote, a man with a vision of what the community wants and the moxie to carry it out, unquote. I could go on about Dean Kirk Watson and the many awards he has deservedly earned. However, I think it best that I stop here and just let you enjoy his presentation. From Baylor University Law School to mayor of Austin to state senator, and now to the founding dean at the University of Houston Public Affairs, a remarkable and distinguished career. Dean Watson, thank you for being here today, and we look forward to your sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you. I really appreciate that introduction. And as I was listening to the comparison of me and Deshaun Watson, I thought, but he's never survived the Texas legislature for multiple sessions. So I am capable of zigging and zagging and running, I think. That's good. So I'm going to go ahead and go. What I'm going to try to do in talking about the topic, which is how you bring about change and community type of activities, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about three things. The first thing is I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at the Hobby School of Public Affairs, because it's a very exciting thing. The second thing is I'm going to lay out kind of an articulation of ethics, if you will, of my ground rules on how good leaders, and not just leaders in public life or elective office, but leaders in their businesses, leaders in their churches and synagogues, leaders in any form in their neighborhood, that how they can go about achieving good leadership. And then I'm going to put together at the end kind of a process that I think we ought to use as we try to bring about good community involvement. And I call that the 5 Ps. So I'm going to talk pretty fast because I want to make sure I leave a little time at the end for questions. But let's talk about the Hobby School of Public Affairs at the University of Houston. When you hear that introduction, some people have asked me, why did you leave a position in this Texas Senate? Last session of the legislature, I was elected president pro tem by my peers, president pro tem of the Senate. I came out of that legislative session happier than I'd been in many sessions because of the work that we were able to achieve and the role that I was able to play. And in a town where Liz and I moved here in 1981. I happen to be sitting in Austin right now because of the COVID stuff, but we moved to Austin in 81. And so I spent my entire adult life in Austin. What prompted a move? And I'll just say it's a couple of things. One is the only thing that would cause me to do something different would have been a very, very compelling platform. And the idea that I could be involved in the creation, if you will, of a relatively new standalone college at the University of Houston geared at public policy in Houston, Texas, was a pretty compelling platform. The truth of the matter is, with Houston being the 4th largest city in America and soon to be the 3rd largest city, and arguably the most diverse city in America and the center of the universe on everything from healthcare to energy, to public education, to higher education, it seemed to me that that was a compelling platform and one that I ought to take advantage of. I've always been somebody that looks for opportunities and considers himself willing to take risk. The Hobby School is now a standalone college. Some of you may have heard of the Hobby Center. The Hobby Center was part of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. But a few years ago, President Renu Couture and the provost, Paula Short, 2 very, very creative people, they actually did some studying of how do you help the University of Houston become the Tier 1 research institution that the president wants, and what do you do with the potential for a public policy school? And that study revealed that you needed to have a standalone college. And so that was created, went through the Board of Regents, went through the Higher Education Coordinating Board, and we officially became a standalone college at U of H by my hiring and my coming on board May 1st of 2020. Let me just quickly tell you that we are very active. Our 4 pillars are, of course, education, of course, research, and there's a lot of wonderful research going on, including some polling and survey that we just announced yesterday that you ought to look at, about a statewide survey we did related to how people feel about the Texas legislature. We're going to release a second part of that survey next week, and it'll be related to COVID, but a lot of good research going on. The third pillar is relevance and purpose. We want to be relevant to what's going on and use Houston, of course, as the platform for making a difference with creative public policy that will impact the world. Relevance and then action. we're not, I think it means something that the president and the provost hired a practitioner of public policy and not just, an academic. That's not a demeaning phrase. It's just that the practitioner in me wants to see us bring action to what we do with our education and our research. I want us at the hobby school to be plugged in at every level of government and industry, philanthropy, so that we make sure that we are providing data-driven, creative solutions that can be used by business, by private industry, by public servants, and in nonprofits. We're very aggressive right now in hiring. The provost has given us lots of room to run, and we are in the process of hiring tenure track faculty and some tenured faculty. We have the highest cohort in terms of the number of students that are now enrolled, and we're aggressively pursuing that. We're also seeking, we have right now, you can receive a master's of public policy, and we allow that. We're doing joint degree programs with a variety of, trying to be horizontally integrated on the University of Houston campus. And we are seeking approval. We'll be at the Board of Regents next month, I anticipate, to create an undergraduate program in public policy so that you can get you can get a BA or a BS, and you will be able to then move on to an MPP, a Master's of Public Policy, in just 1 year. So quickly, that's a quick and down and dirty on what we're doing, but we're very aggressively pursuing. I've only been at the job about 8 months, and I'm real pleased with where we're heading on everything. Now let me shift gears and talk a little bit about what I said a minute ago, my ground rules for how good leadership occurs. And part of the ground rules, as I also indicated, is an articulation of ethics. They're the kinds of things that I sit down from time to time and analyze why something worked or why it didn't work, what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong, and have tried to put those together as a way of the 10 rules of how to bring about change. The first rule is be willing to throw away the labels. I got to tell you, I don't know about everybody that's watching this, but I think we label each other far too much. And we do it particularly in politics, and particularly with what this very divisive election we've just come through. It's really something else. What we do is we abdicate the responsibility to hear each other, because what we do is we put a label on each other. Oh, you're a Republican. Well, that's all I need to know about you. Oh, you're a Democrat. Well, that's all I need to know. I don't need to hear anything else. Oh, you're with the Chamber of Commerce. Oh, you're an environmentalist. Oh, you're this or you're that. And what happens, of course, is that label becomes the killer of empathy. There is no way for us to then hear anything or to feel anything about other people once we put that label. Now, some labels, they have meaning, and I'm part of, I ran as part of a party. We all have those labels, and we're proud of them, but we should never let them be the ending of a relationship. We should never let them be the ending of a relationship. So be willing to throw away the labels. Rule number 2, listen carefully and speak plainly. Here's what I mean about that. That's pretty obvious, right? Speak your mind. I don't think a good leader, someone that wants to bring about change or bring people together, can achieve that if people don't know what they're really thinking. If they're playing some political game and they're spinning it, or they're not telling the whole story, then people can't follow them, or people are going to be disappointed because they're going to in that leader, because they're going to think, oh, I thought I knew what was going on, and now I realize they've kind of sold me out, and that's what they'll think. The other part about it is listening carefully. I think we've gotten ourselves to the point in the area of trying to bring about change in leadership where we don't listen enough. Now, I just mentioned that as part of throwing away the labels. Labels have become weapons instead of creating empathy. But the truth of the matter is that we don't try to seek new ways to hear each other. And that's what I'm talking about. Part of this is pretty simple. Liz and I raised two kids, two boys. They're now adults. And, you know, during the time that we were raising those boys, there were times when we really got after it. We got upset with each other. We raised our voices, and then a couple of hours later, when things calmed down, we'd say, "Oh, that's what you want to do?" I didn't understand that. I know how we can do that without it impacting me in a negative way. We figured it out because we were listening differently. I think our adversarial means of hearing each other sometimes creates problems. For example, you know, Austin City Council meets on Thursday nights, and every Thursday night they have these things called public hearings, where there ain't nobody hearing nothing. I mean, they're public complainings, public yellings, whatever they are, they're not hearings because they're adversarial and they're not set up to try to figure out what somebody really wants. So good leaders speak plainly, but they look for new ways to hear. Rule number 3, you're never, ever, I hate to break this to you, but you're never going to meet everyone's concept of perfection. You're just not going to do it. So don't try. Don't try. Here's what I mean by that. You know, sometimes people define consensus as you have to have 100% agreement. I find it interesting to be watching all this debate about what is unity, and is that 100% agreement, or you agreeing 100% of the time with me? But you're never going to meet everyone's concept of perfection. And if you try, one of the things that's going to happen is you'll make somebody in the room the most powerful person, because we'll do a little bit of what you want. Okay, we'll get what you want. We'll get what you want. We'll get what you want. And we get to the last person who just says no. Well, they become the most powerful person on earth in whatever it is you're doing. Well, you want to hear them out. You want to listen carefully, but you're going to need to move on. You're going to need to not have 100% consensus. I tell folks to follow what I call the 84% rule, which is if you can get 84% of your constituency, whatever that is, at work or otherwise, to go along. They might say, that ain't perfect. That's not the way I would do it if I could be the czar, but it's progress and I'll take it. Run with it. The 84% rule. Now, some of you are probably thinking, 84%, why 84%? Why not 51%? Why not 60%? You know, some cases it might be 40%. Why 84? Well, I'll just be candid. It's what I was reelected mayor with. And so my rule has always been, no matter how pretty I think I am, no matter how smart I think I am, 16% just ain't going to go along with me no matter what. Of course, it's not 84%. It's whatever is getting progress done. You're not going to meet everyone's concept of perfection, so don't try. But the flip side of the coin, if you're not going to try, you can't demand your concept of perfection. Follow the 84% rule there too. Many times you'll have a good vision and you'll think you'll know exactly how that's going to look. But in order to get it done and to make progress and not just have it die, you'll settle, and that's okay. That's not a negative word. You'll settle for 84% of what you wanted or some other number. So follow the 84% rule. Rule number 4, be biased toward action. Be biased toward action. Look, I think leaders find themselves in situations where they become paralyzed primarily by two things that stop them from moving forward. One is the fear of failure. Fear of failure. You know, you got to take some risk. And I don't think failure is necessarily a bad thing if you do it the right way. You know, the truth of the matter is a lot of this, these ground rules came out of failure, where I didn't pull myself in and become a turtle. Instead, I stepped back and said, okay, what didn't work? Why did that not work? How do I change that? So there's value in failure if you learn from it. But the second thing that I've always found is interesting is that people seem to become paralyzed by the fear that the better idea will come along or the better deal. Oh, I can't do that because what if next week a better deal comes along or a better idea, somebody a month from now or a year from now, somebody says, you know, I wish we'd have done so-and-so. And everybody goes, well, yeah, looking back in hindsight, but it would have killed progress it would have killed movement if you had worried about the better deal coming along. Now, I always tell folks that I learned this the hard way. Liz, who I've mentioned a couple of times, she and I will have been married 42 years this year in June. And we started dating when I was 14. But at first, she wouldn't go out with me. I remember it like it was yesterday. 1973, Boswell High School, homecoming, Saginaw, Texas. I went up to her and I said, Liz, will you go to homecoming with me? And she looked at me and she said, no, I'm waiting on someone else to ask me. Well, we don't have time for us to go into how mean that was. And as you can tell, I'm almost over it. But the truth is, there's a moral to the story. The girl was waiting for a better deal to come along, and it didn't. She got me. So the truth of the matter is, don't wait for the better deal to come along. Be thoughtful, be strategic, but be biased toward action. Rule number 5, never forget that hope matters. Hope matters. The reason I bring this up is because hope is what motivates people. It's the answer to the question, why do I get out of bed in the morning? What am I hopeful about? And what good leaders do is they look for the hope in the situation that they're trying to lead in. They try to figure out, why are these people hopeful, and how do I make them hopeful so that they will follow me to the conclusion? Hope always matters. By the way, I learned that one the hard way too. I'm supposed to be dead a couple of times over. I was diagnosed in my early 30s with metastatic testicular cancer, and had 3 surgeries and chemo. And then a couple of years later, when I thought I was back at it, they found on a routine CAT scan, they found another tumor in my abdomen, and so they went in and cut me and field dressed me and stripped my lymph nodes. And by the way, that was April of '95, so I'm a cure when it comes to that. But that's not where the real hope was. Liz and I one night were talking about a friend of ours. He was probably in his 60s, and he had left his wife of many years and hooked up with if I'm generous, I'd say she was probably in her 30s, early 30s. And I said to Liz, I said, she's going to want to have children. And Liz said, well, Kirk, of course she's going to want to have children. I'm sure that's part of the deal, and that's already been discussed. And I said, well, hey, don't take this the wrong way. I mean, I love my family and I love you, but if something were to happen to you or to happen to us, I don't know that I could fall in love with a woman of childbearing years. I don't want another family. The exact same look as in 1973. She looked at me and she said, Kirk, with all they've cut off of you and all the cutting they've done on you, you're not going to have a bunch of women of childbearing years knocking down your door. Hope matters. Even when there's no hope, you get the point. Find what motivates and move. Rule number 6, have a short-term focus, but with a long-term vision. This rule comes directly out of A Gift of Cancer. If you'd have asked me what I was up to the week before I got diagnosed, if you'd have said, Watson, where are you going to be in 20 years? If I was candid, I would have told you within a week of where I thought I was going to end up. The truth of the matter is, a week after the diagnosis, I was a lot more reflective. And what came out of A Gift of the Cancer was that I started living my life more in increments of time with a short-term focus on what can I do right now that will make a difference. I don't get that worked up about long-term plans. I mean, I think that's part of what gave me the freedom to give up a seat in the Texas Senate that I loved and move to a different town and start a whole new project of a growing public policy school. Short-term focus, but try to do it in a way where if you get a good long life or a good long career or good long leadership position, you can carry out the long-term vision. But don't get so worked up on the long-term vision that you're not taking advantage of the situations that leadership and change may allow you right now in the short term. Rule number 7, know your core values and assets and be willing to admit your weaknesses. Know your core values and assets, but be willing to admit your weaknesses. I got to tell you, I don't think we do this enough. I think we get all worked up and get busy, and we don't spend time just on our own. Every now and then, in whatever increment of time you want to do it, and sit down and actually start thinking, what are my core values? What are my core assets? We assume we know them because that's what we get on the treadmill and we end up thinking we're doing. But I think it's important to every now and then sit down and actually analyze those, because some people will tell you, well, your core values don't change. Well, I think that's bull. I think they do change. I think things happen in life. We become better educated. We become more aware. We fall in love. We fall out of love. We have a death in the family. We have children or grandchildren. Our values change. And if what we're doing is we're living in the past in terms of an analysis of that, then we can't lead the same way. We all know this. There's not a person watching this that doesn't know that we need to be willing to at least privately admit our weaknesses. But sometimes we get moving so fast and we get thinking so much of ourselves, we don't end up analyzing what those weaknesses are. So I encourage everyone to do it more frequently than what we typically do. It's made a big change for me. I ended up taking a completely different job as part of all that. Rule number 8, avoid the nitpickers, naysayers, and know-it-alls. Avoid the nitpickers, naysayers, and know-it-alls. Now, I know I started this by telling you to throw away the labels, but those are 3 pretty good labels that you got to pay attention to. I mean, we all know nitpickers, somebody that can just pick every idea apart and just drive you crazy doing it. We know the naysayers. They're always going to say no. No matter what you come up with, they're going to find a way to get to know. The know-it-alls, the folks that are just so much smarter or so much holier than the rest of us are, and they hold it over our heads. And these people get themselves into leadership positions. You may have to work with them. They're probably part of that 16% when you're trying to follow the 84% rule. You need to listen to them. You need to make sure you get everything you can out. Make sure you can't get to consensus, but they call it negative energy for a reason. And that means you need to move on. I remember when I was mayor, we had a person like that. She sat to my right. And I got to tell you, to this good day, no matter where I am, no matter how COVID lonely I might be, no matter how my neck hurts or my back hurts or I'm hungry or I got a headache or I'm tired or I'm cold, if I look to my right and she's not there, I'm having a good day. So you got to avoid the nitpickers, naysayers, and know-it-alls. Rule number 9, create new and different constituencies and avoid creating unnecessary enemies. Create new and different constituencies and avoid creating unnecessary enemies. Here's what I mean by that. Often, when we're trying to bring about change or we're in a leadership position, what we do is we're focused on that target, and we lose sight of the fact that if we would just step back and ask, are there any other ways of doing this that would bring other people along with us? We could change, we could grow the constituencies. We could have greater support for what we're doing. I'll give you an example. For an example, in getting to the Dell Medical School, which was mentioned in the introduction, what we did there is I laid out a vision of 10 goals in 10 years. One of those goals was a medical school. One of those goals was a new modern 21st century teaching and safety net hospital. One was more health clinics. One was better mental health care. One was related to getting more wet lab space from an economic development standpoint. What we did is we went through all the analysis of what were potential constituencies, and then how do we tie that together? And we had people that might not really be for the medical school, but they were for it because it fit in to some other aspect of the overall plan. And then the second part of that rule is don't create unnecessary enemies. I don't get why, what I made a joke a minute ago about the 16%, but the truth of the matter is you can get what you want. And in this day and age, we try to, the politics gets played where I don't get a win. Even if I get what I want, I don't get a win unless I really do damage to you. You have to lose in some way. You have to be hurt. Well, I disagree with that, because that 16% I was just talking about, they may be part of the 84% on the next idea, on the next thing you're trying to change, or the next leadership position you take. So there's no need to destroy. We do it too much in politics. There's no need to destroy and ultimately create an unnecessary enemy. I feel very strong about my friendships in the Texas legislature. I've actually texted with a couple of people just today in the Senate of different parties. We can have friendships, and the reason we can have friendships is because we throw away the labels. I mean, we may fight like crazy on some instances, but we also don't fight in a way that makes us unnecessary enemies where we can't talk to each other the next time. So create new and different constituencies and don't create unnecessary enemies. And rule number 10 is focus on the positive. Focus on the positive. Particularly right now, it seems that all we focus on is the negative. We got enough people that are trying to lead and bring about change that are just mad. We don't need that. We need to find the fun. And I don't mean that in just being reckless. I mean the joy. The joy in being involved in whatever we need to seek it out. We need to look for it, whatever we're involved in. So those are my 10 ground rules of how you go about bringing about change. Now let's shift gears and talk about how we put all of that into a process for getting to that change. And we don't have enough time for this today, but I want to lay it out for you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. That's why I'm talking like a high school debater. I'm talking so fast to get us to where we can have questions. What I call the 5 Ps is how you get to a result. The 5 Ps, the first, and let me say something about the 5 Ps. I'm going to list them in order. And the order is important. The order is important because what I think happens too often in not protecting the process, and that's a key phrase for me, you have to protect the process. But part of what happens is everybody thinks they know what it is they ultimately want. And they jump to the conclusion, this is what I want. And we start out that way. In a lot of our public policy, we start out and you end up with two sides. We have to have it this way. No, we have to have it this way. And then we've jumped to the conclusion. I believe that good process, and I'm going to try to lay it out, good process where you don't jump to that conclusion, but you lead up to that conclusion is the best way to get there. So the first P is purpose. Purpose. I used to call it passion. And really that's the question, why are we here? Why do we care? Why are we raising an issue about whatever it is? Let's go back to what's the purpose of us saying we need a new medical school? What's the purpose, if you will, of us saying that we need to address homelessness, or the purpose of addressing public safety and criminal justice? What's the purpose? Now, somebody's going to come in and say, here's what you could do. Well, no. We're not going to start there. We're going to ask the fundamental question of why we care. Once you get to purpose, and you've talked about that, you've worked it out, you now know what your goal is. And by the way, you can come back and change it. But now we know what the first step is. We go to the second P. The second P is possibilities built on the purpose, right? We now know what we're wanting to achieve. We know why we're here. So now we go to the possibilities. And here, I always let everybody always wave their magic wand. I mean, everything's possible, right? Let's put it all up there. Let's get all the potential possibilities out there. It's also almost the perfect time as you come out of purpose to start doing what we in the old days called a SWOT analysis. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? Keeping that purpose in mind. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? And if you do that as part of laying out the possibilities, and each time you lay out a possibility, you start kind of doing the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. That leads you to the third P, and that's practicality. Because not every possibility is going to work. It's just not. It might be a budget problem. It might be that the unintended consequences of doing it, where you ought to be analyzing unintended consequences, make it where it's not practical. It can't be done. So first P, purpose. Second P, possibilities. And then based upon what you come up with possibilities and the SWOT analysis that you started, then you get into the third P, and that is what's really practical. And that leads to the fourth P. The fourth P is the plan. Now let's put together a plan. Now, by the way, I want to say two things. One is that as you're going through those steps, if you're protecting the process and you're going through those steps, you may go back and add to your purpose. During the practicalities or during the possibilities part of this, you may figure out there's other purposes that we need to think about. There's other parts of this. You may change what your practicalities are once you start doing the plan. That's okay. But it's that you need to try to keep it in order. And then the plan, of course, I think you ought to have a lot of things in that plan that become very important, including what happens as you get down the road and you have successes or something fails. You need to have alternative dispute resolution of some sort in there in case we get down the road and people start arguing with each other. How do we come back and revisit our purpose and so forth? But that's your plan. And then the fifth P is people. Now, really, people runs all the way through it, but I didn't have a good place to put it, so I put it at 5. People. Who's going to be in charge? Who's going to be running the show? Because you got to have leadership. And who are we going to recruit? I will tell you that as part of my process with people is I've always kind of started with kind of a core group of folks that help me kind of figure out purpose, possibilities, practicalities, maybe even kind of an outline of a plan, and then grow, but ask who are the people that need to be involved, because I'm going to need more people involved. So I may grow that. I will grow that all the way through. I may end up going through that process of the 5 Ps multiple times until we get to whatever you're defining as community, whether it's a city, a state, your business, your law firm, whatever it is. You may go through that several times just because you're growing the number of people as you go through that process. So that process is that's what I call the 5 Ps. And I think it's the process that brings about a good change. By the way, I don't think any of y'all that have done leadership training or work or in leadership positions don't recognize how to go about doing that. It's just that I've put it together in that order. So with that, I purposely said I was going to leave some time for questions. I apologize for how fast I've talked, but now I hit my goal. So I'm going to pause and see if we've got questions. So Joseph, you tell me what I'm supposed to do.
Well, first I want to say, as a former high school and college debater, I love the speed at which you speak.
There you go.
Signpost and roadmap every single concept. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to put up on the screen real fast. This is our ground rules for the Q&A. Most of the folks have been sharing their thoughts in the chat room, but if you have Q&A questions, the first question is from Doug Thorpe. It says, how do we really get past the labels?
Yeah. Well, it's hard right now. Man, it's the hardest I've ever seen it. But here's this, and I don't mean this as a simplistic answer because I think it is hard, but we have to model the behavior. We have to model the behavior, and that requires us sometimes, I think, getting out of our comfort zone. Look, if you can't tell, I've got some strongly held points of view. But the way I try to approach people is my first rule of thumb. If I meet somebody new and you tell me who they are and you give me the labels, and just like anybody else, my knee is going to jerk. I'm going to have a knee jerk reaction. I promise you, I'll have an instinctive reaction based upon labels. I mean, I'm trained that way. We're all trained that way. But then here's what I think. I always then start asking questions in hopes that I'll identify 3 things. My goal is to find 3 things that I agree with you on. Because if I can get to those 3 things that I agree with you on, I now know I can find ways for us to have a friendship and a relationship, and one that is based on trust. So I think too often we let the label tell us there's nothing I agree with you on. I just don't agree with you because you are X. You got to take the time. But if you start every relationship, whether it's a business relationship, whether it's a truly adversarial relationship, whether it's a negotiation with the question, what are 3 things we agree on, then we'll be able to get there. I'll give you a good example. There's a member of the Texas Senate that he and I could not disagree more on public policy. We disagreed on pretty much everything that came up public policy if there's a disagreement to be had. But he's one of my better friends. And it's because I know him as a person. And he's a guy that I never question where he's coming from. I may really question how he got to what the conclusion is, but I don't question where he's coming from. He's pure of heart, even if I think I disagree with how his heart is. He and I were able to do some really good things that nobody else knew about because we knew we knew where we agreed, even when we were disagreeing on a bill. And he would take an amendment, or I would take an amendment on my bill, because we would start with what we agree on. So how do we get there? I think we have to start looking at people with some empathy and trying to figure out how we can agree.
Thanks, Kirk. The next question is from David Newberger. It says, James Baker, the former Secretary of State, was noted for his own 5 Ps. I believe they are.
Oh, I didn't know that. Prior
preparation prevents poor performance. And you answered David's question because he asked you if you're aware of that. You said no. So question answered.
I'm not aware of that. But I'll tell you what, I was not. I'll look that up. I'm not trying to violate any copyrights here. Here's what's interesting about that. On prior preparation, that fits the way you said that fits very interestingly and neatly with my concept of protecting the process. You're using the process to be prepared. One of my favorite attacks on me in public life came from our weekly alternative newspaper in Austin, Texas. And they came out one time, they always got mad at me because they would, well, I'll tell you, they were writing a cover story on something I was doing, and they kept asking what I thought were silly questions, mean questions. They were trying to beat it up. So I told my assistant, get the reporter in here tomorrow, and I'm going to give them a full hour. Well, I didn't do that very often. So they said a full hour, and I said, go. And I want you to ask me everything you think is wrong about this. And so, man, I was boom, boom. I was knocking them all down. I felt like I was in the Matrix. I was dodging everything. The next day, the paper comes out, or whenever it came out, and I don't think I made any progress other than they added a paragraph that said, and as usual, he had an answer for everything. Well, prior preparation, but it's also not jumping to conclusions. It's knowing where your purpose is. It's knowing what the possibilities were that don't work because they're not practical. So I like that. I like that Baker proper planning idea. Well, somebody's telling me he just borrowed it too. Okay. Good. I like that. Other question?
Yep, it's from Bill Herman. It's what are the critical steps to move the U.S. Congress towards a productive institution? Is it practical, and what's a role model?
I missed part of that. Say it again, please.
What are the critical steps to move the U.S. Congress towards a productive institution? Is that practical, and is it a role model for the country and the world?
I think the number one problem. I mean, I could filibuster on this, but I won't. Let me give you what the number one, in my view, the number one problem is. It's gerrymandering. It's gerrymandering of congressional districts. If we did redistricting, where look, the lines are being drawn where it's a real strong Republican district or a real strong Democratic district. And what that does is it does away with any room for moderate thought. You better not, if you're a Democrat, you better not be getting along with Republicans, because if you do that, we're going to beat you in the primary. And they'll go in that district and they'll beat you in the primary. If you're a Republican, if you disagree with us and you don't fall in line, we'll beat you in the primary. So what happens is the only people that anybody's running for office are listening to are those who can beat them in the primary. And what that does is that takes away the ability to reach across the aisle and have any sort of moderate thought. I was always amazed at how people would get mad at me because they'd say, why didn't you stand up and speak on that? Well, I knew what the vote was going to be, and I knew that my speech, and everybody knew how I felt about it. My speech wasn't going to change anybody's mind, and I might be working with that person on 4 or 5 other things. Again, why create the unnecessary enemies? But because of the way the district lines are drawn, everybody wants you setting your hair on fire. And Joseph, I don't know about you, but setting your hair on fire. But everybody wants them to set their hair on fire, as opposed to trying to find a way to get to the 84%. So I think the number one issue that is damaging our ability for Congress to work, that can in fact be practically fixed, is doing a better job. I think we ought to have an independent commission that draws district lines, get the politicians out of it. And that's coming from a guy who's fought all the partisan fights and been part of that. But I was on the redistricting committee when I resigned from the Senate to become the dean of the hobby school. My first job out of law school was working doing redistricting. And then I went to work for a federal judge that we dealt with the 1981 congressional redistricting. So this has been a passion of mine a long time, but I think it's doing enormous damage to our democracy.
Okay, next question is from Sherry Murfish. What do you tell young people considering a public policy career?
Sherry, good to hear from you. That's great.
I call that a softball.
Yeah. What I tell them is that I have a lot of advice, as you might guess, but I tell them that it is a gift of a career, because if you're doing it right and you're doing it for the right reasons, there's not a better way to feel the impact on people's lives. And, I'm a big believer that we're all one. We're all one body. We have different roles to play as part of that one body, whether it's a neighborhood, a city, a state, a country, a business. We all have different roles to play. Public service, in my view, is people that take up true public service and do it for the right reasons are people that recognize what their strengths are and are trying to help the whole body operate. And that's part of the reason I'm so excited about where I ended up. Think about it. I used to do we used to call it the Kirk Watson Campaign Academy. And every 2 years I did a campaign academy where we brought in young people. My PAGE program, when I was in the Texas Senate, during a legislative session, we used to run lots of people through that PAGE program. We used to drive this sergeant at arms crazy because I had so many people doing it. But the reason I did that is I wanted them exposed to, I wanted young people exposed to public service.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the questions. There's one more sneaking in.
Yeah.
It says, what advice would you offer private citizens to get their elected official to hear them, especially if our opinions differ from theirs?
Oh, that's a great question. Real quick, I'll say one or two things. One is show up, and I don't mean just at those public hearings I was talking about where nobody heard nothing. And I don't just mean when they have a town hall or something like that. Go to their office, go to their field office, go to their office where you can introduce yourself in a way where you're throwing away labels and not creating unnecessary enemies, but go in and meet their staff. Get to know the people that work with them. They're busy. They're doing what they're doing. They may be in DC, they may be in Austin, but getting to know their staff so that people get to know you and relate to you and figure out those 3 things that you agree on, that will help you become somebody that people will listen to. Also, know what you're talking about. And what I mean by that is don't just assume that whatever is the rallying cry is going to get you. Know the detail. Know why it's be prepared as to why it's important, but know the detail so you can actually educate, and that helps them find the areas, the 3, if you will, that I keep using of where you agree. And then be empathetic. Think about it from their perspective. Particularly if you're in disagreement. If you come in my office and I don't agree with you on X, think about why it is that I don't agree with you, and is it something that you can help me understand? Because I may not just have I may not understand it. I mean, there may be something that my life experience doesn't relate to it in the way that it should. I will tell you that when I ran for mayor, I'm not going to tell you what the issue was, but I screwed up an issue because I told everybody exactly how it was going to be. And now I use that example to tell people that don't get too be prepared to govern, because you may find that there's 16 ways of looking at something once you get in office that you didn't even think about. Well, be empathetic to the person you're talking to so that you might figure out why it is and educate them on something where they'll listen to you the next time.
Well, Dean, I really appreciate it. I know that we have it scheduled till 1:30, and while some people may object to me giving 30 minutes back to people, I think based on what you've shared so far, Dean, I think you're okay with it if we give it back to them. I wanted to thank you and thank Gerald and everybody that supported us in putting this together. And to do a quick reminder that our next presentation is next month. We'll be with Chris Mansky, who's the author of The Prepared Investor. He's also been on this meeting the entire time. And we're going to try something different next month. We're going to open it up and have it as a meeting so that we can all yell at each other and apply Dean Watson's rules and see if they actually work. And we're going to do breakout rooms and networking and all that other good fun stuff.
Cool.
So thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and everybody have a wonderful day.